Mhm.
Tell us about the biggest effect you think the pandemic has had on live music and touring.
Oh, the effects have been widespread. Obviously, we have seen the majority of concerts being canceled, postponed, just halted for a year now. There are still some shows going on here and there, but touring in general. So what we've seen is a real devastation of the live music industry because people haven't had revenue for years. They've had to find jobs elsewhere. They've had to do other things, and the live music sector, uh, it touches everybody. It's not just musicians on the road or music venues. It's, nobody's getting paid for performance rights right now. Um,
Right.
and there's all these different things that touch it. So I think just in general, just watching the entire industry have to continuously scramble to figure out what is going on, how to adjust to it. And I think especially when it began in the beginning, nobody thought it was going to last this long.
Mm. Hmm.
And uh, in the live music sector, there have been at least 90 independent music venues that I've clocked that have closed permanently or up for sale. That's obviously a big one. And there's still plenty that are very much in danger. Uh,
And so, have those venues been more in one particular region, or would you say they're spread out?
they're very much spread out. I know that Austin in particular was hit really hard. They lost a lot of venues because a lot of their venues were in danger ahead of this, before the pandemic, for several different reasons, but mainly for development in the area. These Austin is one of the live music capitals of the world, and they have a bunch of music venues,
A
but
lot
it's such a,
of songwriters.
yeah, absolutely, artists. And it was, you could have these music venues because artists were living there, they were there, they came there to do live music. And what happens is become such a popular place that you have all different kinds of development coming in, whether it's condos, hotels, and they're taking up space. They're complaining about the noise that's coming from these venues, but that's the reason that people are there. And at the same time, the rent goes up, which then pushes out the musicians, the songwriters, everybody who has made that city really what it is. And so, yeah, several music venues there were lost.
How, in particular, has your job been affected by the pandemic?
Billboard has had to move everything online, just like everybody else. We are all still working remotely. There's a few people who go into offices, and of course, that requires um, questioning about health concerns and all that, and scheduling to make sure that there aren't too many people in the office. I have been working from home since March of last year. And, it's especially for my job in particular, covering the live music industry, there's so much interaction with people.
Hmm.
And that has been sorely missed for the last year. So there's plenty of Zoom meetings and all that kind of stuff. We're staying as connected as possible. But in terms of publishing, we've had to figure out how to change all of that to online, digital, and still manage to get magazines out, physical magazines to people, which has been difficult. But I have to say the team has done an amazing job of getting it done.
And so, do you feel that Billboard, based on the pandemic and everything going digitally, do you foresee in the future that that's going to be the new normal for Billboard? And
I know that we have an emphasis on digital. It's fairly important. It's 2021. There's no way around it. It's very important to make sure that everything we do is online, is accessible in some way or another. But we very much still have our physical magazine, and uh, take and do that. It's, again, it's still important to a lot of people to still see some things in print, and we have all our charts and everything in there for our subscribers. So it's definitely not going away anytime soon.
Mhm.
The physical will still be around for quite some time.
So I know you mentioned not long ago about SOS, Save Our Stages. Tell me what that's about.
So when the pandemic broke out, a lot of independent music venues were kind of left fending for themselves, which of course is kind of the point of being independent, is that you're on your own. But about April of last year, a group came together called NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association. They got together. They're about 3,000 members strong at this point, and they put their effort, collective effort, into lobbying the federal government for funding. Because while certain places were struggling more than others during the pandemic, they knew that together as a much larger group, they could actually get significant funding to save venues. And so their bill that they helped draft with several senators and representatives was the Save Our Stages Act. They introduced it in July, and it worked its way through the government for a while. Unfortunately, a second stimulus package wasn't passed until December.
And that was going to be part of what the Small Business Administration, giving songwriters funds to, and
so this particular one got expanded. It was meant to be $10 billion going strictly to to independent venues and promoters and agents. It got expanded when it went through Congress to include museums, zoos, different places like that. And it also got expanded to $15 billion instead of 10. And that passed it was signed into law by the former president on December 27th. And unfortunately, people are still waiting for that funding. It is still being processed, it's still going through. It's not quite as quick as the PPP that went through the banks, but the SBA is handling it and still trying to come up with the best way for applications to get out and to really avoid a lot of fraud.
Okay. So in touching on that, has Billboard come out with any type of programs to assist songwriters or the music community since the pandemic?
We personally have not. Our resource to the music industry has been to provide resources. So when the pandemic hit, our main goal for a lot of writers, and again, you can see some of this on the website, was to build places to find this information. Where do you go? Our job was to sort through everything. We had a entire national guide that broke it down by state, or if something was by or nationally, of where you could apply for music, or not music, I'm sorry, where you could apply for financial aid, whether it was food, all these different things that helped musicians, from songwriters, musicians, to people working in the music industry who are also out of a job.
Right. And so with it being Women's History Month and your CEO being a woman, I want to share some information with you about what I thought was pretty shocking numbers when it comes to women working in this industry. That there are very low percentages of women who work in areas such as music production, engineering, executive positions, and from 2012 to 2018, across a nearly 7-year period, and 700 popular songs on the Billboard Hot 100, only 21% of the artists were females. And then furthering that, only a little over 12% songwriters are females, and sadly only 2% are producers across 400 songs that were female. So when I share this type of information with you, what comes to mind?
The first thing that comes to mind is that that is sad. Obviously, the Billboard charts are a reflection of consumption, and that is what is happening. And it's not to say that people, just because somebody's not on the charts, that they aren't out there, that they aren't doing great, that they aren't doing well. But of course, when you have the biggest names in music the ones that are getting played on the radio, the ones that are being featured on the Grammys, on the late night shows, and so many of them uh, being not being women, not being people of color. It's really jarring. And of course, I think a lot of people would think of themselves as really open listeners. You want to hear all different kinds of music or music from all different kinds of people. And I don't think a lot of people are thinking to themselves like, oh God, I really wish a woman wasn't behind this board doing this as a producer. That doesn't cross people's mind. That's not what they're thinking.
Right.
And so I think there's definitely uh, it's been a huge issue for many years. And I think that things are slowly changing. I
Mhm.
don't think enough is happening, but I think when you look at uh, a lot of women are taking charge themselves these days, and it's not one of those situations, where they needed to step up. That's not what I'm suggesting in any way. But I think a lot of women were probably doing more work than they realized they were doing. They weren't getting credit for the things that they were doing.
Right.
So you have some women who were, you know, especially in the pop world, who were the face of the music, but weren't getting credit for producing, uh, even though they were doing the work of it. But somebody else was, they didn't know they could put their name on that. So I think that's slowly starting to change, where people are realizing that that is something that they can put their name to. But I also think that more people are trying to be actively conscious about who's in the room. I
Right.
think that, of course, starts with a lot of women who are doing that for other women, who are thinking to themselves, why am I in this room with a bunch of men when I know very well that women could be in here, could be working with me? And that's where it's going to start. Women are going to open the door for other women first, because that's the way that works. People tend to hire, to look for collaborators, etc., that remind them of themselves. Prior to the pandemic, obviously, games were already virtual. They were already had different people participating, watching. You have like the Overwatch leagues, all these kind of things that were happening, and then to have somebody as big as Travis Scott go in and do a show was a great deal. Of course, it's going to be really exciting. I mean, you have somebody like Travis Scott who is really big, and that's going to attract a lot of names on its own. But to incorporate this, to give people something to do, especially earlier on when that show happened. But we've seen several different iterations of this with gaming and music interacting. A lot of it on Twitch, different shows being hosted, and even then, like venues have created virtual ones so that people can play that way, and not have to be there, and still entertain their fans with live music. I think it's really interesting. I definitely think we have not seen the end of that. There will definitely be more.
So now, if we weren't in the midst of the pandemic, with your job, would you be out at Coachella or Essence Festival reporting?
Uh, yes, I miss live shows so much. I would be out at shows on a weekly basis. I love it. I would come home tired and I would not care. I never regretted it. But yeah, we would be at Coachella. We would be at conferences. We would be doing lots of things in person, and live music, promoting different albums, doing all that kind of stuff, which we're seeing everything go online. But it definitely is a very in-person job most of the time.
Okay. So what's the coolest thing that's ever happened to you while
uh,
you were working there?
for working for Billboard.
Well, what's the coolest thing about your job? Is it
Oh,
that?
whew, I am trying to think. The list is honestly long, and it's only been 3 years. uh, this
Okay.
happens this happens to me when people ask this, and I freeze. But I have gotten to see Dolly Parton in person, which was very exciting for me. I have gotten to interview Boy George, which was really fun. um, I got to spend a morning with Issa Rae at her coffee shop in Inglewood, which was really amazing. I'm a big fan of hers.
Is that the one in the show?
Yeah, that's her show is Insecure. She started a was literally about a year ago, right before the pandemic hit, and she started a music company as well, like a full. They do all different kinds of things, music syncs, and
Mhm.
a bunch of different things that they do. They started a label, which was really cool. So
Okay. Yeah, and so is that she's like selecting the music for the show? Is
yeah,
people
so she has
for show to her company for
not
singing?
specifically for Insecure.
Mhm.
Insecure has, I believe, contracts already with people with HBO, but she has she started a company that would pick songs for would be hired to pick songs for other projects. There's that I believe it's Showtime or Cinemax. It's called show called P Valley. Well, its
Yes.
name. Uh,
Mhm.
her company did that one, and they've done plenty of other ones. But she's making movies. She's hopefully getting her company hired to also uh, pick the music for these movies. And if you've seen Insecure, you know that she has very good taste in music.
Okay, great. So I have one more question and then we're going to open it up and I'm going to go through some of the questions in the chat. Guys, be patient. We have time. So, how do you think Billboard stays ahead of the curve with this digital age? And I think we kind of talked about that earlier, but
Yeah. Um, that's a great question. I think it's really difficult, but I think if you look back at the history of Billboard, which, like you said, is over 100 years, it's about 126 years old at this point, it
mhm,
has continually changed over the years
mhm,
and adapted and done what is necessary to survive and just be relevant. I think our coverage of the music industry is something that is not as readily available in other publications, and it's really in depth. I also think one of the most obvious reasons that we are still really relevant is the music charts.
mhm.
As somebody who started working for Billboard only 3 years ago, I'll watch movies or old movies and stuff like that, and just to hear people from decade after decade after decade always reference the Billboard charts, it just tells you how important this organization is to the music industry.
Hmm. Definitely important. So we're going to start going through the chat and answering a few questions here. So Taylor, can you, how do you see small venues like 50 to 100 seaters surviving during COVID, post-COVID, or being revitalized during post-COVID?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I think going back to the Save Our Stages, which is now the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, that's coming out hopefully very soon and will obviously provide up to $10 million for these independent venues, these small ones. Um, I encourage anybody who thinks they might uh, be eligible for that to really look into it because it's something. Local jurisdictions have also been giving money out to from the CARES Act and whatnot to
Hmm.
help these places survive. I think it's really hard to imagine that these places are going to survive off selling koozies and T-shirts for an entire year. Uh,
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes down to landlords. If you have a decent landlord who understands your plight, is not trying to sell that land to development, that's one of the big issues that has certainly come up in the pandemic of a lot of these venues being cultural institutions, but not owning their land. They own their business, but not the land underneath it, and therefore have been susceptible to being kicked out. But
Okay.
I also think that these smaller venues are going to be more, have been, and will continue to be more adaptable. There is a venue in Arizona called the Rebel Lounge, which during the pandemic transitioned itself into a coffee shop.
Hmm.
And that's how it was able to make money. And it will still probably be able to do that post COVID and have some people in there during the day and then also be a venue at night. But you can do more things in smaller spaces because you don't have to worry about these larger crowds. Larger crowds can be very difficult to deal with, and also they're a lot lighter on staff. The bigger places are going to need a lot more security. You need the same amount of security to open a venue for 2,000 people that you do for 20,000 people, or at least close to the same amount. And so I think it's just going to be about flexibility. And unfortunately, it's a little bit about luck. Depends on where you are and if your landlord is understanding.
Definitely. So next question is, when do you think touring will open up again? And when can we maybe really expect it to be? 2022?
That is, if you had asked me this question in January, I would have said a pretty hard 2022.
Hmm.
It was obviously looking very bleak at that time, and the case numbers were out of control. But within the last month, the last 2 months, it has drastically changed. I know what the industry is definitely indicating at this moment is the fall. We're seeing Governor's Ball in New York announce dates.
Hmm.
We just had Life is Beautiful announce their dates for September as well. And so, in terms of festivals, they're definitely aiming for September. And if you look at regions like the South right now, there are shows happening. Obviously, Texas has had a terrible time in the last couple of weeks, but prior to that and going forward, they have been having shows. There are people going to shows being hosted out there, and we're talking Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, North Carolina. Shows are happening, but in terms of touring, national touring, I do think that that's going to have to wait a while still.
Right.
Fall would be the earliest. 2022 is very likely.
Hmm.
I think, as anybody knows who has gone on tour, you don't make money off of going to one or two shows. You
Right.
need a full slate of dates. And in order to do that, you need the country to be opened up in a much bigger way than it is right now.
Right.
So I, just as an estimate, things change daily right now, but I would say fall to 2022 for any sort of significant reopening.
Okay. So next question is, have you been inspired as a writer by the pandemic?
Yes and no. I think a lot of people could probably relate to the fact that the pandemic has both been inspiring and stifling at the same time. So while there are things for me to cover, things for me to report on, that stories that I want to help tell, that has
Hmm.
happened plenty. It's actually really given me a space in this industry to talk to certain people, to know who I'm talking to, really build relationships. At the same time, there are days you get up and I just walk to my living room and I am not ready to work. It doesn't feel right. You hit that kind of pandemic wall.
Hmm.
But I, I have, especially in the beginning when, as such a music fan, a lot of music was being postponed, not coming out. And I write to music. I love music. And
Oh,
to have all of that kind of just stalled, obviously, there's older music I can listen to, but to not have that additional inspiration was really hard in the beginning. And that has changed. I think people have adapted. I have adapted. And I think we have stories that we need to tell. And we need to find, like I said, resources, ways to help the music industry, and that has inspired me.
so let's see if we have any more questions, guys. Let's see. Have you ever toured with a band that you were covering?
No, I that is very much like a is it Almost Famous kind of scenario, which they definitely do not let you do anymore. So
Oh,
there's there's a couple that have happened last few years. I don't remember exactly which tour it was, but Rihanna had a tour where she brought the press with her.
mhm.
It's definitely more of a
Oh, and who was that? Can
uh,
you?
that was Rihanna, and it was
Oh, oh
uh,
yeah, I
yeah,
remember that. She had the big, what, 747 or something?
something like that.
Yeah,
I really hope a documentary comes out about that one day, because it sounds like it was a wild ride for everybody who was involved. Uh,
yeah, definitely.
unfortunately, we do not get to tour with bands, nor do I think I would enjoy sleeping in a tour bus. Let's be honest.
Right. So let's see. I want to get to a few more questions because we're almost out of time. Not quite, but we're getting there. So, have you seen any positives and silver linings since the pandemic that might change the shape of touring and live music? I think we kind of already answered that, but did you want to add to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the music industry in general, touring and otherwise, uh, took a beat. We weren't all on the road. We weren't all moving super fast trying to get this and this done. And obviously, what we saw happen in June were protests for over the death of George Floyd
Hmm.
and other members of the Black community.
Hmm.
And I think that that really opened up the music community in a really different way
Hmm.
than I've ever seen it before, because people really stopped to think about uh, how how the music industry has been exploiting certain people over many years and the things that they can do. It really, a lot of people took the time to educate themselves
Hmm.
and decide and come up with different things that needed to be done. And I know some things have been implemented so far. I know there's a lot more work to be done, but I think in general, the ability to pause for a little while and really evaluate has done a great service to the industry as a whole. I know that many coalitions have been formed, people have come together in a way I don't think they would have been able to had we all been out on the road moving as fast as we did. And so I'm hesitant to say that there is any sort of silver lining, but I do think if there is one, it's that.
I agree. I think that really opened up a lot of awareness from different um, parts of the nation, and people got involved that you would never think would get involved. So I definitely think that the message resonated in a really positive way.
Yeah.
So we have time for two more questions. Sorry, this is off topic, but any thoughts on Billboard charts incorporating Facebook music video streams into the charts?
Yeah, we just announced that today, um, which somebody is George. You're very on top of it.
Yeah, so we have George is a psychic, I think.
I think the more places that we can pull data from, I think is good in terms of just diversifying. Because, like we said before, you look at the some of the charts, the Hot 100, the Billboard 200, and there isn't as much representation in there. And I
Mhm.
think people are, discovering more on different sites. And I think it's good to incorporate data from different places just so that you get a fuller picture of what people are actually listening to, what they're actually interacting with. So I hope it'll be helpful for people.
Yeah, I mean, with this TikTok craze and everything else, I mean, people's tastes are all over the place for sure. So let's see, we have one more question, I believe. Um, do you feel over the years you've seen more women in different roles on tours? Tours and festivals seem to still be heavily male dominated.
Yes, they still are very much heavily male dominated, but there has been change. Just as somebody who frequently goes to concerts in general, I, in the last few years, have seen a lot more uh, women on stage handling gear and doing stuff like that. There has been a more concerted effort to get more women into the industry because there's this myth that uh, women don't want to be part of, don't want to go on tour because they it's too much for them, or they want to stay home and have kids,
Hmm.
or that, all these different myths that we attach to women that aren't necessarily true. There are plenty of women who, yes, would rather stay home, don't want to be on a tour with a bunch of smelly guys or whatever it is, but that's not the case. There's so many women out there who love music, who love being in these spaces. And
And
I think
capable.
yeah, and they just want to be out there and do the same job as anybody else. So I have definitely seen more people doing that. There are this includes everything from photographers to roadies to lighting, all that kind of stuff. So it's happening. And I know behind the scenes, there are a lot of people who have registries for this. I interviewed a woman last year, again, prior to the pandemic, who had an entire registry, uh, just a Google Doc. Anybody who asked for it, it was a list of women who would do all of these jobs
Wow.
happily and who are good at it, who are already vetted, who know what they're doing. And it was just about uh, getting that information to people. And so it's happening. Again, really slow, not at the pace we would like to see it at, but it is happening.
Well, Taylor, you have been so amazing today. Oh, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. So, how can we get in touch with you? And one question before you answer that. How do you get your information? Can anybody text you information about an event or a concert or what?
Yeah, it's really easy to reach me. My email is taylor.mims@billboard.com. So feel free. Obviously, if you go to the website, you will see my work, and that's the majority of where I am. And hopefully, this information has been helpful for everybody here. It continues to be helpful what I do and what we do in the future. But we support the music industry. That's really what my job is.
And so your Twitter handle?
Is Taylor J Mims.
I don't think you're on Instagram, right?
No.
I didn't think so. I know you're on Twitter.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. You have such a bright future ahead of you. And keep us abreast of what you're doing. And who knows, we may be calling on you for something for a charitable event with Sona, something in the future. So thank you so very much, Taylor, so much.